So it's that time of year again. I am done with my final projects and exams at Rice, which means that my semester has officially ended and now my summer break starts. But before that, I do want to share with you guys the classes and things I did this semester. Both just for me to reflect on what I did, but also to kind of give you guys some insight on what it's like to be in college. If you're new here, I made 3 similar videos, one talking about my freshman, one talking about my sophomore, and then the very last one was about my last semester junior year. So if you're interested, be sure to check those out. I'll link them in the iCard above and in the description below. And as mentioned in my previous video, one of the suggestions I had when making these videos was that I should really be splitting them up by semester instead of by year, since it'll make the videos more digestible and more fast. And yeah, that's what I've been doing for this junior year. I had one about my fall semester, and this video will be about my spring semester. With that being said, here are the classes that I took during my spring semester junior year at Rice University. The first class that I want to talk about is Comp 421, otherwise known as Operating Systems, and as the name suggests, in that class I learned about operating systems. We did a project where we worked on threads and device drivers, and then another project where we basically built our own operating system kernel. And personally, I think this was probably one of the harder comp classes that I took during my time at Rice. With that, along with the fact that I'm not, very fond of low-level programming, I wouldn't really say this was one of my favorite classes. But one thing that I've definitely, learned and seen throughout college is that at least for me, the harder the classes are, the more I actually take away from them. The more I feel like I've learned throughout the semester, and the more I actually retain, in the years following. So I guess that's one positive way to look at the class. Oh, and the professor, he replied to anyone's questions in 5 minutes flat. So that was pretty cool too. So moving on to the next class, you'll notice that I don't actually have, a class description here. And that's because I don't actually have one that's provided by Rice, since the class wasn't taken at Rice. Neuro 306, otherwise known as Concepts of Learning and Memory, was a class that I took at the Baylor College of Medicine, and it was taught by 2 professors from the Baylor College of Medicine. This was a bit of an interesting kind of class because, I had not only did I have 2 professors for the class, but it was also only half a semester long. And so how it worked was the first half of the semester I didn't have the class, and then in the middle of the semester, that's when class started. And I had one professor for half of the class, and then the last couple weeks I had the second professor. Just because this class was half a semester long did not mean that it was easier than any other classes I took. In fact, content-wise, we learned so much. We went in depth about how learning works and how the brain functions during memory and during learning. We touched on a bunch of different concepts, and just to name a few, we learned about how place cells work and how location memory works. We learned about theta oscillations, slow wave and REM sleep. We learned attractor dynamics in the CA3. And if you haven't studied neuroscience in any way, then you probably don't know any of them except for maybe REM sleep. But that's just some of the topics we learned, and there was just so many topics packed in that month and a half that was all really interesting. So at the end of the day, I did enjoy this class, and yeah, I would definitely take it again. Next up is Psych 321. For this class, we learned about developmental psychology. But before I even talk about what we did in this class and what we learned in this class, I first want to say that this class was probably one of my favorite classes that I've taken throughout my 3 years here. Our professor, Professor Nicolau, actually managed to make Zoom meetings enjoyable. And this class was something that I looked forward to pretty much every week. As for the content of this class, as noted by the title, it is about developmental psychology, how we develop as we're babies and as we grow up to the point when we're the elderly. It was a lecture-based class, but most of the class was actually discussions, between students and the professor. We spent time talking about, our own personal experiences of development, and to be honest, that was the best part of the class. I'm not typically a guy that really enjoys class discussions too much, but this class was definitely an exception. Overall, really enjoyed this class, and if you're coming to Rice or if you're at Rice and you have the opportunity to take this class, then I would highly recommend it. Since we're on the topic of psychology, the next class that I took was Psych 463. This was about medical human factors. In this class, we learned about the current medical systems in the world and how the current system really causes errors in the way we treat patients. And then we discussed solutions for that. There were a lot of different aspects that we talked about in this class, and some of them, just to name a few, involved surgeries, the macroeconomics of the medical system, EMRs, just to name a few. For me, I wasn't really interested in the medical side per se, but what I was really interested in was human factors and being able to develop that skill of seeing and examining something and then trying to find the flaws in that system, not just technically through code or just the way it's implemented, but also socially. If you watched my last video about my fall semester, then you'll probably know that I took another human factors class called computer human factors. And I thought when I saw this class, medical human factors, it seemed to me like a nice kind of add-on to my journey, if you call it, of learning about human factors. And I do think it really did help me expand my view on the things that human factors can really help with. Also, the professor was really nice, and it was super clear that he knew what he was talking about. So again, at the end of the day, I did really enjoy this class. The final two classes that I took during this semester were two LPAPs. I had LPAP 192 and LPAP 198. So if you don't know, at Rice, you have to take 1 credit hour of what's called an LPAP, or Lifetime Physical Activity Program. You can essentially think of it as like PE class in high school. So then you might be asking me, why did I take all these LPAPs when I took an LPAP last year and I took an LPAP during my freshman year? Well, for me, I really enjoyed the LPAPs that I took during, again, my freshman and sophomore year. And I also had enough credits in my schedule to take these classes. So I thought, if I have the time for it and I really enjoyed the previous LPAPs that I've taken, why not take more? LPAP 192, otherwise known as weight management, we essentially learned a bunch of weight training regimens, weight training routines that not only helped in weight management, but it also helped in just general strength training. And I thought it was a nice class because it allowed me to stay somewhat active during my week when all I did was sit down and watch my Zoom classes and then sit down and do my homework. It was a nice reason for me to get my body moving. LPAP 198 was actually a lecture-based class where we learned about nutrition. The topics ranged from macro to micronutrients, all the way to discussions of how specific foods helped or didn't help, your body. And while I'll admit that since it was lecture-based and it was 2 hours long, I had a hard time focusing in the class, but it was a nice refresher from the other classes that I took during the week. If I were to only choose one though, I would choose weight management, simply because, I like the more active style that weight management had versus nutrition. And with that being said, those were the classes that I took during my junior spring semester at Rice. And as for the extracurriculars I did, well, it was pretty much the same as last semester. With school being online and the fact that I was living off campus, I didn't feel like there were any good clubs or school-related extracurriculars that I could do. So instead, I focused my time on my startup. I've already talked about my startup a couple of times in the videos that I've made, so for this one, I'll just keep it super brief. It's essentially a classical music live streaming platform, and it's something that I've been working on with some of my friends since freshman year. If you're curious about it and want to learn more, then I'll link the website in the description below. And the final thing that I want to mention, since I already mentioned it again in my last video, is my internship. I'll be interning as a software engineer for Capital One this summer, and I'm super excited not just to work there, but also to meet all the new faces. So with that being said, those were all the classes as well as extracurriculars that I did during my junior spring semester. This semester, similar to last, was definitely not an easy one, and the pandemic with online classes only exacerbated it. But despite it, I think I made the best of it. I still learned a lot, and I still think I took away a lot. So I am personally content with how the semester went, and I'm excited for next semester. Things are looking a bit brighter now, so hopefully we'll see some sort of normal by next semester. Of course, as always, feel free to like and subscribe, And if you have any questions about college or just life in general, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I love reading them and I love responding to them. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I want to wish everyone a great summer. I'll see you next one.